Thank you, Vlad. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning. Well, especially thank you for joining to Brody Neunschwander, my mentor and great calligrapher. Thank you so much. Today I'll talk about setting different systems of writing, different scripts in a creative way, sharing with you my way of teaching and the works of my talented students. So after this lecture, I will be happy to answer all your questions, and I think that we can start playing the video. My name is Monika Marek-Łucka. Thank you for being here. I'm from Polish-Japanese Academy of Information Technology, Warsaw, Poland, and it is a great honor for me to meet you today. In this lecture, I would like to share with you my experience as an educator in using multi-scriptural typography and sharing the method of applying it to educational process. Eventually, I would like to present to you works of first-year students, and these would be static posters and kinetic typography, works based on mixed reality media. So let's start. In the philosophy of late antiquity, one of the logical devices constructed to introduce to Aristotelian categories describing the world of entities was the tree of porphyry, and the diagram's name referred to the structure of tree with a main trunk and the branches growing out from it. And there were always two branches on each level of division, introducing two subcategories, one of each was always a negation of the other. I mean, the structure of A and non-A. And for example, the category of body was divided into animated and inanimated one, whereas the animated bodies, namely animals, were divided into rational and irrational. And although Porphyrian's tree set of pairs of categories did not cover the typography, its dichotomic structure is the way how today the realm of typefaces are divided into and defined by being divided into Latin and non-Latin script. And the dominance of Latin script and hence labeling the variety of richness of other writing systems and non-Latin seems confusing because of reduction the term is performing. In this context, the decision to introduce students to multi-scriptural typography assignment is first of all aimed at changing the way of thinking, the way of talking about typography, namely making the expression Latin, non-Latin, more complex and just more complex just than mere opposition to Latin script. So when I introduce students to multi-scriptural typography, I'm trying to make them pay attention to categories in which a designer could think about creative solutions while setting two different writing systems. And a perfect guide in the realm of multi-scriptural texts is the Rosetta Stone. It was made in 196 BC on the first anniversary of the coronation of Ptolemy V, and there was a prodigy of Greek kings who ruled in Egypt after it was conquered by Alexander the Great, and the text engraved declares Ptolemy's new status as a living god, a pharaoh. Just as Neil MacGregor, the director of the British Museum where you can admire the Rosetta Stone, said, to read the whole content is about as thrilling as reading new EU regulation written in several languages. It's bureaucratic, priestly and dry. But for typographers and designers, Rosetta Stone is considered one of the most beautiful examples of harmonious combination of classical Greek and two forms of Egyptian script, namely the everyday writing of the people demotic script and the priestly hieroglyphs. Before delving into the formal aspects of combining different writing systems together, I'm starting from more general overview, the symbolic aspect of multi-scriptural typography. I want students to keep in mind that, and let me quote Huda Smith, who is an abifares, that the coexistence of scripts is a kind of a statement of cultural cohabitation, end of quote. The coexistence of scripts is a kind of a statement of cultural cohabitation. And the relation between different scripts on the same composition has a symbolic value. And it informs implicitly about the relationship between cultures standing behind particular scripts. Let's go back to Rosetta Stone. And the composition is divided into 3 areas of more or less the same size. 3 scripts are written in separate optical blocks. Hieroglyphs on the top, demotic script below, and on the bottom the stripe of Greek writing. And although there are no lines pointing the boundaries between the scripts, they do not interfere. And when we look at the composition as a non-Egyptologist, we could say that the relationship between the scripts are more or less based on visual equivalence. And they create like a threesome unity, a harmony. Does that mean a peaceful coexistence of newly coronated Ptolemy V and the Egyptian priesthood? And the Greek dynasty of the Ptolemies did not trouble to learn to learn Egyptian after taking Egypt. And they made the officials speak Greek. So Greek became the language of state administration for 1,000 years. And this supremacy could have resulted in making Greek inscription much more dominant than Egyptian translation. And yet that did not happen. When Ptolemy's fifth father passed away suddenly, leaving the boy as a king, the dynasty and its control over Egypt became fragile. And there were revolts throughout the country that delayed the young Ptolemy's coronation for years. Given that, it would have been reasonable for the creator of the Rosetta Stone to make the Egyptian inscription more dominant over the Greek script. But why more dominant? Egyptologists probably would raise the argument against visual harmony of these 3 scripts, and probably they would raise the argument of Egyptian visual canon applying vertical hierarchy. More important parts were always on the top. Hence, in the scholar literature, the multi-scriptural composition here with the uppermost hieroglyphic writing represents the primacy of Egyptian priesthood. This was a kind of visual gesture towards Egyptian priests without whom the coronation of the Ptolemy of the Fifth was as a rightful ruler of the country would not be possible. And the text of the inscription gives us some extra clue. Ptolemy may have become a god, but to get there, he had to negotiate with the priests. And the trade-off was that they should no longer come to Ptolemaic capital city, Alexandria, every year. Instead, they could remain in Memphis, the old center of Egypt. And one more thing, the priest caste was also given very attractive tax breaks. And the Rosetta Stone is therefore an expression of the power and compromise behind keeping the status quo. It is a kind of a visual testimony of a successful win-win negotiations with a mutual respect remaining. And how does that can be helpful in the work of the designer? So multi-scriptural composition always introduces a question of the relation between cultures, creating visual matchmaking and balance, or emphasizing the difference between the scripts should be preceded by thoughtful decision. What kind of commentary would a designer like to give? And that is something that I stress during my lessons. Now examples. Here we have a project by Julia Strzeszewska and Sebastian Iwanowski, and the students were asked to choose text, then urban place, and use it as a trigger in Artivive and Zappard apps for kinetic typography. And that decision to use Devanagari and Latin script was inspired by Gandhi's quote. The students created a narrative where window bars symbolizing the chauvinistic way of thinking are being broken, then they collapse, and eventually you can see 3 lines of text appearing. And the goal was to apply to Latin script visual characteristics of Devanagari. Students achieved it by setting the English text on the visible baseline and creating, let's call them, artificial descenders. The bottom parts of minuscular letters E, A, or T are elongated and exits and goes below the baseline. The bottom parts of minuscular letter, they also resemble, by being elongated and set below the baseline, they resemble shapes of Devanagari script. I guess that the aim of finding the way to show the unity of different cultures looks nice in here. In terms of visual language, students were able to find the counterpart of Devanagari in Latin script. And in the second work, we can see a different approach in mixing Latin and Devanagari. Here, the student Arnit Manchanda made a typographic composition with interlocked lettering. But instead of using fonts, she decided to draw letters by herself. The whole poster looks very DIY, very punkish. Arnit used the characteristic feature of Devanagari, the horizontal headline called Shiroreka, and combined it with invisible Latin script baseline. Another interesting decision was to use counters for a place where curves of both scripts can mingle. And the final effect is a playful harmony of both scripts. Let me quote Arnit's summary of this assignment. It was quite insightful learning how 2 scripts can be so different and can still merge in a beautiful way, seeming like one, end of quote. For the third example, I have chosen the work by 2 students, Warwalan Jirakangwan and Nadia Shvitka. This very work is particularly moving because it became a political statement or typographical representation of experiencing the same political situation in both countries. Warwalan and Nadia wrote, "We are from Ukraine and Thailand, 2 quite different countries but with similar history. In about same time, 2014, in both of our countries were huge protests against government. A lot of people died. Many was injured just because they wanted to live in a democratic country. Do not use outrageous power to persecute us. Democracy is people's right," end of quote. Students decided to use a place commemorating Maidan protests for a trigger. Once you look at one of the stands using ATypI app, you can hear one of the stanzas of the song written by young Ukrainian musicians about 2014 protests, and you can see Latin, Cyrillic and Thai scripts with the text of the stanza. And in the upper part of words, us and them constantly appear in 3 languages. And the creative strategy here was to use a space between the words, which brings, the words us and them, which brings the potential for transition from one script to another. And the space repeated the width of the space of the stand. The Rosetta Stone introduces another dimension of multi-scriptural typography, and let's have a closer look at the alignment. The bottom part with Asian Greek is read from right to left. The glyphs are set horizontally. The opposite situation happens in the case of Demotic script, which the Egyptian called document writing. Demotic was always written from right to left. The upper hieroglyphic part is read from right to left as well, but it could have been written from the other side as well as vertically. And this flexibility of hieroglyphic alignment makes the scribe's decision to compose the text in a way that follows horizontal alignment in the Greek and the demotic script somehow symbolic. Just imagine that this part could have been rightfully written vertically, which would make this part of composition odd, comparing to two parts below. And yet we have three horizontal alignments, parts creating balance unity. Although, again, in terms of ancient Egyptian visual canon, the double right to left direction of Egypt's script would count as a symbolic domination of Egyptian priesthood over Greek king. But according to me, that it's a very subtle, in a very subtle means. The first project exploring alignments of different scripts is a poster designed by Julia Negric. Here we have the main composition of three horizontal lines of Chinese script, and the goal for Julia was to intertwine Chinese signs with Latin letters in a smart way. Her answer was to find within each Chinese sign a shape that would somehow resemble Latin alphabet. In effect, the letter from Latin alphabet, and in fact, Latin letters are very geometric here. They jump freely over the baseline. Nevertheless, well, the legibility is more or less still remain. For me as a tutor, it was inspiring experiencing how Julia was experiencing with letter forms and trying different shapes of Latin letters. And in order to do that, Julia must have abandoned shapes of the letters she was accustomed to and invent new ones, not necessarily obvious. Asked for the summary of her assignment, Julia said, and let me quote, introducing a second language shouldn't be just a boring duplication of the first. It is necessary to create an integral concept for the poster, showing the importance of both languages in a playful and interesting way to attract the audience. This creative strategy enabled an intellectual game with the poster reader and the award as a satisfaction from deciphering Latin text in this poster. The next project is designed by Victor Dunec. His composition uses mixed reality apps, ATypI and Zapart, so that once you are in the place chosen by Victor, and that was Institute of Korean Culture in Warsaw, and look at it at the spot with your phone up, kinetic typography appears. So the topography triggers the typography. Victor's work is a personal story, and he said, I spent my childhood in Korea. I used to speak Korean perfectly, but now, as the time passed, I remember only a few words and left with the warm memories to which I can never return to. End of quote. So Victor's idea was to use Hangul and Cyrillic and change the alignment of the latter so that Cyrillic script is losing its linear order of letters and follows the logic of Korean signs. Instead of words in horizontal alignment, words in Cyrillic are divided into groups of 3-4 letters and composed like Korean-like signs. So the creative strategy behind making that possible was interlocking letters and modifying the original proportions so that they would fill the optical square space of Korean-like signs. A kind of chameleon effect, just as we feel Victor's struggle to remind himself the forgotten language, and all what is left is just the visual character of his childhood language from the childhood. And another work, the project by Anna Ferro, is a typographical interpretation of the Greek sentence "Know thyself" from the facade of Delphi's temple. And here Anna was also working in mixed reality media. her goal was to create a Greek-Latin typographical group so that Latin letters would repeat the characteristic elements of Greek letters and the predominant round shapes. Anna had no previous experience in font designing. But nevertheless, she managed to create Latin letter forms consistent with the Greek ones by manipulating glyphs of the font used to write the glyph part of the expression. But look at the original form of the letter H in there, or smart way of using Greek letter N for a letter U, Latin letter U in the word unknown. Quite something as for a first-year student, right? And there is thinking in terms of consistency, looking for the common denominator in the letter shapes. The last project I would like to share with you is the poster designed by Alexandra Zubarova for Latin script and Tibetan Drutsu script. That project is particularly interesting because of the research behind it. Alex met with professors from Warsaw University and learned herself Tibetan calligraphy to design a poster which serves as a political statement and fights for the rights of the oppressed. In the poster, we have three primary colors, just perfect for dramatizing something as basic as the right of freedom. And then Alex, by leaving Latin script in the background, decided to create a hierarchy of scripts, which is another semiotic tool in representing the fights of rights to be oppressed, like giving the voice for those who were forced to stay silent. And the lesson from Alex. I have learned from this exercise that the more you learn, the more you can learn. End of quote. And some conclusions. We were starting our classes with reading about different writing systems and discussion on the most interesting issues. And absolutely invaluable help in developing this assignment was for me the book Bi-Scriptural, edited by Wittner, Thoma and Hartmann and published by Niggli in 2018. Thank you so much for the authors. It was amazing to see how much information absorbed by students during the reading was eye-opening for them. It appeared that the typographical aspects which seems obvious in Latin script are surprisingly different in non-Latin. There can be no typographical counterparts of one script in another, or the logic of setting one script can be counterintuitive comparing to the other one. So, and another fascinating thing for students was just realizing that the designer holds the power to dramatize the relationships between two cultures. And just by designing relationships between two different writing systems, that is a lot of responsibility, right? It appeared that all decisions in terms of visual language, just an analogy, dominance, or separation, just to name a few, have an impact on the communication process. And for me as a tutor, it was deeply touching to observe the engagement of students, to carefully design the visuality of textual message. The conclusion that I would like to share with you is that artistic education in artistic education, we need to provide students not only with practical hints, but also with theory and texts that will deepen the understanding of the topic. And the more they understand, the more sophisticated thinking process they are able to conduct, which eventually lead them to beautiful design solutions. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you, Vlad, for your help. If you have any questions, and I think that is a good time for asking me, I have I had a quick conversation with Kalapi on our chat concerning the Devanagari script on the first project with the window bars. Thank you, Kalapi, very much for your remarks. And as I wrote you, I would love to read a longer email from you with your critique, so that I could learn more about Devanagari and lead my students in that assignment. Thank you, Brody, for your remarks. Brody asked if Egyptian Egyptian could also go from left to right. And yeah, that is correct. So it is a deliberate decision to go in opposite direction to Greek. And as far I've made that research and talked with an Egyptologist, and definitely he confirmed that that was a kind of a kind of a visual, a means to show the dominance for the Egyptian priesthood, because definitely hieroglyphs could have been written in all directions. I mean, horizontally, vertically, left, right, and right, left. I guess that demotic script only from right to left, but nevertheless, it is like 2-1 for Egyptian parts. But as I told you during my lecture, I think that these means are very subtle. I guess that nevertheless we have a feeling of visual balance, although maybe that is a kind of of our the formation of our perspective, that from the contemporary perspective. Do we have any other questions? Would you like to raise any issue or have me address? Irmi, thank you. We have a question. Do you feel like you need to know the scripts to work with them? What are your strategies to get the expertise on the scripts when conducting the class? Okay, thank you, Irmi. Well, first of all, I guess it is better to know something, or at least to know the structure of the writing system that you are dealing with. As I've mentioned, my basis during our classes was a book bi-scriptural. So this book, full of amazing essays on and a summary of manuscripts, and this is a theory that I'm sharing with my students. So as a researcher and educator, I'm into Latin letters, into Latin alphabet, but I really love to go beyond the realm of Latin alphabet and to get some inspirations from other writing systems, other calligraphical gestures, and to see and to observe what is happening, what are the results from mingling of these systems. So definitely before the students start even making sketches, they are asked to read about particular script. They just need to know the structure, even and the anatomy of letters, the logic behind the writing system, so that they could grasp the categories in which they can creatively deal with the assignment. I hope that is a kind of an answer, satisfactory answer for your question. Thank you, Irmi. If any of you would like to write me an email, I would be also happy to read it after this lecture. So just maybe I will. I think that I have write down on our chat my email. All right, Kalapi. Okay, so I guess that is a quite a professional advice from Kalapi how to set Devanagari script. connect, okay, independently, so that the Devanagari and most index script shaping is tricky because the fonts don't work out of the box, and the designer typesetter needs to explicitly set text shaping options. Okay, I think, Kalapi, that I need to expand our communication via email on Devanagari, but I would love to. But that's interesting. That definitely the Devanagari is definitely happy to connect independently. That's interesting. Okay. Does that mean that you do not need Shiroreka line setting, for example, a word? I remember one of our, Arnit, I have asked Arnit to introduce us to Devanagari on one of our lessons. She was teaching us how to write like particular words, and that was very inspiring for other students. Email, okay. All right, so I'm waiting for your email, Kalapi. That is great. If there are any other questions or issues to be addressed, just do not hesitate. There is a chat box in here. If not, then probably Vlad would pop up and students from across together on something. Oh, so Ishan, this project could be expanded to have students from across the world together on something. Yeah, definitely. I teach at the college. Would love to discuss separately. Ishan, just please write me an email or leave your email in the chat box and I will write to you ASAP. That is great. I would love to share the way how, if there are any educators in here among us, I would love to write to you and share our experience and way of teaching it, just to make a multi-scriptural typography more appealing to our student as an education tool. Okay, Kalapi, thank you so much. So Ishan, I'm working. Please just do write your email on chat box, okay, or just write down mine. Thank you. Okay, thank you so much, Ishan. But nevertheless, one of my the biggest conclusion is that really students love to read and love to expand their knowledge. And the theory is a good starting point. I have finished Academy of Fine Arts in Poland, and I guess that is in artistic education, especially in this kind of schools, the theory is not something that is fully stressed. And we have to, as an educators, we need to emphasize the fact that a designer's job is not only like a workshop and practical things, but it is mixing his intellectual assets and talents as well. So it is a hybrid work, and reading text analysis is like a basis, a starting point for beautiful projects. Okay, Vlad, I think that I can. The scene is à vous.
Okay, thank you very much for your presentation and for the discussion. It's really great to hear. So if there are no more questions, I think we might end this session.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, thank you once more. It was a great experience. It was really nice to see you. Thank you everyone who's been with us on this speech. That's quite a lot of people. So yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
You too. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Bye everyone.